Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in.
Welcome to this episode of our podcast. Today we're talking about gamification, games, gaming, all the things related to games in learning. And that honestly begs the first question. Our guest is Dr. Jerry Zanstra. And Jerry, can you help us understand gamification versus true games? And the words get jumbled and confused in our industry.
They do.
What's different?
I'm not even sure gamification's a real word.
I don't really think it is, but we use it.
we use it because it's an industry term, and people know what you mean.
They do.
When you say it. But, you know, in my mind, a game is related to play and sport, right? There are certain essential elements of a game. You have to have a clear objective. Games that never end, and there probably are games that never end, but games that never end, you don't really know what you're shooting for. And then there have to be a set number of rules. You have to operate inside a set number of rules that, you know, players, if you and I are playing a game, it could be I go, you go, I go, you go, right? We take turns. Or it could be we're simultaneously trying to do something. There's a bunch of different rules to games, and most games have them. There are different ways that games are laid out. Sometimes you're the hero, sometimes you're the anti-hero. Sometimes you're trying to achieve something good, and sometimes you're trying to prevent something bad from happening. And so there's a book by a gentleman named Yukai Chow. Both of us have read that in where he talks about white hat and black hat games, right? There's two different, you're trying to achieve some good or you're trying to prevent some evil. Sometimes you're the protagonist, sometimes you're the antagonist. And you know, just the thinking about games and then thinking about that true game,
right? Which
is what we're trying to prevent teenagers from spending too much time playing.
Right.
To gamification, gamification in my mind, and it's worth a discussion, is where you're taking gaming elements.
Right. It's just elements.
Yeah.
I think that's where the ication part comes from, gamification.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's a good distinction. And gamification, you know, even there, your motivations might be different.
Right.
You might have like badges, so sense of accomplishment. I achieved something. You might be motivated by public recognition. There's a leaderboard, right? You remember when that stuff came out.
All those, right. And it was huge, big buzzword in the industry. And that's why I think it is important to distinguish between the two, but also the root of gamification really is motivation. How are we motivating our learners? And that should be a part of any learning experience you design.
Yeah. And so I think I'm hard pressed to think of many learning experiences that we create that don't have some element of, I think that's like, you know, flour in bread. It's sort of baked in, it's become an essential to how we think of it. But I think there's opportunities to become more sophisticated. But people not only, how you use games, right? It can be as a knowledge check. I think that's how it started.
Typically, right.
But inside you may teach somebody something and then let them play, and then teach something and let them play. Or it can come at the end. But that idea of game elements is and again, people tend to remember.
They do, because it's kind of a story.
Yeah.
You know, we've discussed that before. There's a bit of there's motivation, but there's an external story to the learning when you put the game elements in.
And it's, Mary and I, my wife and I, play a game, I think it's called Trash. It's just a card game, right? Long winters in Michigan sometimes. and we play this card game, and it is complete chance. There's no strategy at all. It's just fun. The other night she beat me 13 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, okay, what's going on here? That's not really what we're talking about.
Right,
The
right.
idea is that we are using knowledge that we've gained or a skill that we've gained, and we're putting it into practice, not in a real setting, but inside of a game. And that gets interesting because some of the technologies that are available now are things like augmented reality and virtual reality, and suddenly games become very, very realistic.
Right.
And so there's some fascinating things happening inside of games, and again, I think of people that are younger, right?
Absolutely.
Employees and team members who are in their 20s and 30s. Their expectation
Yeah.
is that there's going to be significant game elements inside of learning. They are not used to rote memorization that I think is how I learned as a kid, because there weren't other options. But now when you open a textbook, if you look at a 5th grade science,
I don't think there are textbooks anymore.
okay, well, the last one I saw,
I kid.
there might not be,
but
but
yeah,
there were
not.
all sorts of things to do and
Right,
play
yes,
and
yes.
pretend, and it was overwhelming to me because that's not how I was taught. That's not how I learned to learn. I think today learning's quite different. So, yeah, interesting topic.
Absolutely.
So we'll come back in the second half and we'll talk a little bit more about gaming and all things gamification.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
So welcome back, and I think let's continue this conversation about gamification, games, but it gets interesting and tricky because at the root of its motivation, right? And if we apply that to a global audience, different cultures have different kinds of motivations.
They do.
And that's an interesting thing when we talk about how do we create a game that could work across multilingual, multinational organizations.
Yeah, that's a great topic. Again, both sides of the argument, there's truth to be found. So in the very first one, different cultures are motivated by different things. And games have to tie into motivation.
They do.
If you're not motivated to play, guess what's going to happen?
There's no game if nobody plays,
Right.
obviously.
I mean, if it's not fun to play.
Right.
So, in the U.S. context and some context in Europe and some other places, we are highly individualistic. And we sometimes don't play well with yourself
I think that's a fair assumption. Yes,
we are
fair.
acquisitive, right?
Yes,
We are people that acquire, raise yourself up by your own bootstraps, all those sorts of things. That kind of attitude might be completely not just foreign, but inappropriate in another culture, in places in Asia where I would never put myself forward.
Right.
I would think of the group first.
group.
I want the group. I want the social side of this. And so I want to play as a team. I want to win as a team. And even if I lose, it's okay. I remember not sure if we'll include this because I don't want to step on any toes. When I was in graduate school, there was a large grouping of South Koreans, and we were playing ping pong. And I thought I was a pretty good ping pong player until I met those guys.
Oh, sure.
And as they would play, every point they would apologize.
Oh,
Right? It was really a different experience for me.
Yeah.
And if they lost a point, which they didn't very often, there was, and they won. There was, I won. There was no gloating because I realized that something's different culturally. So that's true that the game motivation has to match
right.
the culture into which you're going. The flip side of that is there are some universal motivators that you can tap into.
Right. there's a basic human level that we can work with. Yes.
Achievement could be
Right.
group, could be individual,
Right.
but moving up, accomplishment is honored in almost every culture that I know of.
Right.
Maybe there are some where it is not, but the idea that you're achieving, that you're overcoming, that you're making new strides, you're learning new things, you're applying new things. I think all of those things are international motivators that people can connect to.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insight when it comes to especially the global cultural piece, and it's a interesting and a good one we need to navigate.
Yeah. But intentionality, right?
Exactly.
You need to think
Absolutely.
about it.
Absolutely. And so I'm just going to throw out, I feel like I ask this a lot, but I feel like it applies in every situation. We talk about AI and how does that work into games, whether the creation side or the design.
Yeah. Well, and it's when you first think about games and AI, you think, oh, AI can create the characters. AI can create the rules of the game.
Yeah.
AI can create the background. AI can create the sound. AI can determine the steps, right? As you do A, it leads to B, and different levels and so on. That's just the start, and the gaming industry is trying to sort this out. But AI can actually create a game that is responsive specifically to you. When we think, it's like algorithms, right?
Right.
An algorithm, you can choose A or B, and then we can do certain branching scenarios that are predetermined. You don't have an infinite number of choices.
It's very limited.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas AI can actually respond to how you play the game, and the game gets built as you play it. So it's more than game creation. It's more than characters and rules and scenarios that you might choose. It will act, and I think that's where learning is going too.
Agreed.
Where AI will be able to create a truly individual learning map, curriculum map for Miriam versus me versus somebody else. As we get in, the AI is actually 2 steps ahead of us, creating as it goes. Maybe you know where it ends, maybe you don't. And that's pretty, that's not future, that's now. And I can only imagine where it's going to be in a few years. So
yeah, that's powerful and also scary, and something important for us to think through, I think, as learning professionals. So.
But it'll also make gaming a lot more accessible.
Absolutely,
and the
for
experience is
everyone.
a lot better in learning. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
thanks.
for your insight. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again on one of our podcasts.
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.